Cheers, Harry. We just did a little cheers. We'll do another one for you.
Cheers, gentlemen. Who are we waiting on?
I joined. How come Comio didn't have his camera on last time?
That's part of Credit Suisse's rules.
They gave him shit about his hat, didn't they?
Probably. And I gave him that hat, which, you know, that reflects on me, I guess. But yeah, that's just part of their strict rules. I had to sign all kinds of affidavits every time he comes on. I just got done signing, you know, my life away to make sure that, and I didn't even, of course I don't read it. I'm just like, yes, whatever, just to have Comio on. You know, I'm probably saying, you know, I'm probably signing away my first and second and third born, which would be great because they're costing me a lot of money. Comio, I could see that you're on now. Yeah, how did that go? Turkey hunting's hard, man, especially spring season.
Saw your killed one this morning.
What? You're eating? Can you get your eating done before? This is kind of an important.
We're not recording yet.
Yeah, it is actually recording. So.
Oh,
yeah.
You got to give us a heads up, Harry. You can't just spring the recording on us.
Good Lord. Maybe get your eating and your, you know, maybe. I noticed Bump went to the bathroom last time. You know, you get this shit done before. This is important. America wants to know. They want to hear from the leaders of the beer industry. And sadly, this is all we could come up with.
Yeah.
But
do me a favor. Don't include any video of me in my Maverick.
We'll cut you out. Don't worry. But,
I heard they canceled.
It's too bad though, because I get so many props for my hat when on the first one.
Millicent gave you that hat.
I know. I wish I could be allowed to be on video. It's a crime, but whatever.
Guys, thanks for being on this. This is our third one, I believe. And 2 weeks ago, we had some insights. We are now literally in day 50 of this sequester in place. And things are starting to be lightened up. But Bump, why don't you start? You put out a report this morning about off-premise sales, and it seems to me like they're still rocking and rolling, which kind of surprises me.
Yeah, this is week number 8 that I've been tracking, 3/8, I think, through 4/26. So it's week number 8, and we're looking at the last week was week ending April 26th. And it was one of the highest growth periods versus a year ago that we've seen in this 8-week period. Obviously, the first pantry load kind of sets the pace, but a couple things happened. Number one is we had positive trends versus a year ago at high double-digit rates across the board for beer, wine, spirits, and then every single piece of beer, wine, and spirits was up double-digit. And then we also had strong growth versus prior week, which was a good week. So beer has had 4 consecutive weeks of growth week after week, you know, versus prior week. So which is good. Wine has been down versus prior week, the past 3 or 4 periods. Spirits continues to grow at a pretty good clip. I was talking to JB earlier. His distributors have told me that last week was one of the greatest sales weeks, sales to retailers that they've had. Some say it's equal to or greater than their 4th of July period. So JB and I were, we were kind of swapping stories about whether consumers are just saying, the heck with this, I'm ready to go out, I'm ready to party. Maybe it's the warmer weather, the sunshine. Maybe it's some of the beaches getting open. Maybe it's just people saying, hey, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down fight. I don't want to be stuck inside my house. There's a whole lot of things. And anecdotally, I told JB that there's a kid I play ball with that he works for the town in the recycling area. And I asked him, I said, well, hey, tell me what you're seeing in the recycle bins. And he said, Mr. Williams, we've had to go back 2 or 3 times each week now because there's so many cans and bottles in the recycle bins that our trucks have had to go back to a factor of 2 or 3. And I says, that's interesting. That's a pretty good telltale right there.
That's that's good news.
And it's great news. And
especially that they called you Mr. Williams.
they're youngsters.
What's that about?
I thought they were looking for Tater, his dad.
Yeah,
Right.
And I asked the kid, I said, well, listen, in the rich neighborhoods, what are you finding? He goes, oh, we're finding a ton of spirits. We're finding a ton of wine, but we find an awful lot of beer. I said, what kind of beer? Well, imports, but we're finding a lot of, these are my terms, not his. We're finding a lot of premium and below premium brands that are just loaded in there with cans. So it doesn't make a difference how rich you are or how poor you are or where you live. You're drinking a lot of beer. You're drinking all kinds of beer, which is kind of cool. So trends are looking strong. Retailers are looking forward to this week ending May 3rd, which I think will be even higher than prior weeks' sales. So leading into Cinco, but I don't even think Cinco came into play very much on this one, Harry. I just think it's.
But how do you account for Molson Coors saying that their depletions are down 14% and the first few weeks of this month?
I've got a lot of potential answers for that one. I'm going to take the high road and say maybe the majority of their business was in the on-premise arena.
That doesn't make any sense to me, but all right. So
you know what I'm saying on that one is
yeah. Well,
inventory builds. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So JV, what are you seeing out there in the trade? Your clients, you're talking to a lot of craft brewers, right? And what are they saying? And by the way, you look very tan. I guess you've been spending a lot of time outside or something, hiking or.
It's the rum.
It's the rum. Okay. Yeah.
No, I have been outside quite a lot actually. I'm lucky that I don't live in the middle of a city, so I have been outside a lot, and it's nice. Harry, it's like we're going into, like you said, 50 days. 6 weeks of this, depending on where you live, and I think initially everybody was kind of hit the panic button, like, holy smokes, because it was just unprecedented. It's like, what do you mean bars are closed? What do you mean restaurants are closed? What do you mean I'm lost all these sales? And I think they've sort of gone past that, and a lot of them now realize, whether it was because of the PPP money or they're experiencing greater takeout sales, a lot of them are starting to kind of, I would say, relax a little bit and settle into this new normal, and they're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And sadly, for some others, not so much. Some of the predictions that we made several weeks back, I think, are starting to play themselves out a little bit, that people that were in the very, very best position in terms of brand equity, consumer loyalty, name recognition, all of those things, they seem to be faring okay. And I talked to 2 people today whose off-premise sales, they're up, period. All in, they're up. It's outpacing all of their on-premise sales. So that was a surprising number. I'm hearing
is that the minority though? I mean,
absolutely. It's
okay.
Absolutely the minority. It is a very select, it's the best of the best. And that was kind of my point. At the other side of the people, I think that we've talked a good bit that there were some real headwinds for craft beer in terms of whether we don't want to belabor this point, but there were breweries been open at a rate of 2 a day for quite a while, and that we all knew that was not sustainable, and that's come to a screeching halt. But there were a lot of headwinds facing some people from spirits and wine and cannabis and direct to consumer sales and all kinds of things prior to COVID-19 hitting. And we sadly are hearing some challenging stories from those, but the stories of people being up overall, that's absolutely the minority. But there are a few people that were. But I say that to answer your question more broadly, people went from kind of panic mode to settling in to getting past this. And we can come back and talk about the PPP money later, which I think is a whole other topic. But
I would love to get back to that actually. And
we will. Go ahead. I'll pass the mic.
A clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Say it to put it politely. Comil.
Yeah.
Tell me what as a banker. You cover publicly traded companies. It seems to me like wine and spirits are holding their own against beer. And what do you see from your perch?
Look, I think the first thing that we're seeing, and maybe dovetailing off what Bump was saying, is the consumer has found this is typical. The consumer figures out a way to acclimate. And at the beginning, we had a bit of a shock. Part of the shock came with pantry loading, but we're now getting to a place where the consumer is just a little bit more acclimated to the environment that they're in. I think they get their bearings about them. It also helps substantially more than it helps in the normal scenario when the weather starts to improve, because people now have a better understanding of what's going on, a better understanding of social distancing and what it means. But it's much easier to practice when you can be outside. If it's the middle of a rainstorm, if it's cold outside and socializing requires going to a bar, is very different from 4 people in someone's yard 10 feet away from each other in a circle. And so I feel like you've got a little bit of a change in that. People are finding really unique ways to still socialize. This includes what used to be cool or used to feel like a very novel idea of having a bunch of folks on Zoom and doing calls with each other. We're hearing about folks that are hosting house parties where you can have a DJ for you live, and one person cooks food and they send it around to each of the homes. All these ideas sound like ideas that something that never would have happened and something that might have been interesting to try once, but now the consumers figured out a way to acclimate. So far it doesn't feel like we haven't received the full kind of whatever pain may or may not come with the recession. Partially could be PPP, could be a variety of sorts of things that may come later, but at least right now, I think the wave of pantry loading maybe has shifted to a wave of acclimation, and we'll go from there.
Well, I mean, and that is interesting because there people find a way, right? Nature finds a way. If a frog doesn't have a dick and he needs a dick in 100 years, he'll grow a dick. I mean, this is Darwinism at its best, and people are finding a way to socialize, and this whole hanging out in their driveway. I thought, oh, that's just Instagram bullshit. No, a lot of friends of mine are doing it, and I live in an apartment, so I don't, and I don't like to hang out with people anyway. But I've heard that other people, regular people that aren't like me, do these things, and I think that's great. So the one thing that has struck me is initially I said on our first, if you look back and listen to our first broadcasts on right after March, middle of March, and I said, I think beer has an advantage because it's sold in grocery stores and that's where people are shopping. Well, it turns out liquor stores are open too. And I'm wondering if that's not true anymore. And Bump, you'd be, the best to know. It seems like liquor is doing well and accelerating.
It is. You got that COVID weekly update, and there's a couple charts in there that show 4 different time frames for beer, wine, and spirits. And the next chart shows the single week in time by class of trade. The liquor stores on the very far right-hand side. Liquor store for beer, wine, and spirits has consistently, for the eighth week in a row, shown double-digit growth across every sector of beverage alcohol. So you're right. What we talked about on our first get-together was, does beer have the advantage? And I thought it did too. I really did. What I didn't take into consideration was that just because if I work in a city or wherever I work, if I can't go out after work for a cocktail, or I can't take my clients out for lunch, or I'm not going to enjoy a Manhattan after work on the way home on the train or something, it doesn't mean I'm going to stop drinking. It just simply means I'm going to go to a liquor store, or in some states you can buy it in grocery stores. I'm going to buy my spirits there. We saw a huge jump from the 750s to the 1.75 handles. We saw that, I think, 3 weeks in a row. Then it's come back to the 750s being the leading package again. But if I recall, the number one growth percent change type of spirits is tequila. Why is that? Because it's easy to make a whole pitcher full of margaritas than anything else almost. Nobody knows how to make an old fashioned or or a Manhattan. I shouldn't say that. Most people don't, but margarita, hey, I can go out and buy a margarita mix and just throw in a bottle of tequila and I'm good to go. So a lot of this stuff just makes sense to us. It does. And that survey that I think we sent you first that had to do with the change in consumer purchase behavior, they said that is that I've changed where I typically used to buy my alcohol. Now I'm going to the package stores, the grocery stores, convenience stores again. They also said, yes, I'm drinking a lot more at home than what I have in the past. So it's just, it just makes sense. We're not going to stop drinking. To your frog analogy, just because I can't go to a bar and buy a drink, it doesn't mean I'm going to stop drinking. It just means I'm going to find a way to make that event happen at my house. And we see it happening. So
I think too, Harry, you hit the nail on the head. People are going to find a way. We are social beings, and we always have been. And we're going to find a way to get together either electronically or socially distancing within the requirements that they have there. The other thing that I think is happening, I don't know, Bump, how much this plays into it, but we've talked through our course of doing a couple of these things now. People want to feel normal. They want to feel festive. This news is freaking depressing, man. We're going into debt, and when are we going to reopen the economy? And all of a sudden it's like, screw this, man. I want a freaking margarita with my friends, man. I want to hit the blender and throw in some Jimmy Buffett and feel something that's normal in my life for a while. And I really do think it's sort of the one treat that we can give ourselves to just kind of sustain through all this stuff, because nobody's ever dealt with anything like it. And anything that can, pull the pressure valve a little bit is probably going to continue for a while. And we figured out that, somebody way smarter than me said this, but, we figured out it's very easy to freeze an economy. It's very, very hard to thaw an economy. And we froze the two largest economic engines in the world with the Chinese economy and the American economy. And when they stopped, the train cars just started stacking up behind them. And that's what we're dealing with. And we're trying to clear the wreckage and clear the tracks again. And these supply chains are complex, and it's just not going to unwind itself very quickly, I'm afraid.
That's a great analogy. I love that analogy about like a light switch. We can freeze the economy, but it takes forever to thaw. That's happening. And I know this is anecdotal, but there are bars and restaurants, craft bars, craft restaurants, regular bars and restaurants. And I know it's illegal. Everybody knows it's illegal. But what we're seeing these bars and restaurants do is they're appealing to the neighborhoods. JB, you're right. I want to help somebody outside. I want to help somebody. I'm going to support local when I can. They're appealing to the local neighborhoods through social media. And they're saying, look, we've got these meals to go. And we'll even throw in a roll of bathroom tissue for you, or a roll of paper towels. Come on down for $50. It's meals for two. And I'll throw in a bottle of wine. They're selling bottles of wine. I know it's illegal in some states to do that. Now the most recent one is with Cinco coming up. They're advertising special meals. And they're saying, we will give you a 4-pack in these aseptically sealed containers of pre-mixed margaritas. We'll give you limes, you cut them up yourself, knock yourself out, or we'll give you a 6-pack of Modelo Especial to go with this meal. That's stretching the law, but they're finding a way to survive. And I like that thawing out period. I think that's ingenious. I love it.
Harry, I don't want to hog the mic, but just to tack onto what Bump said, Colorado, I think they made it temporarily legal. And back to our question from before, how are they going to unwind this stuff? We ordered margaritas with our to-go Mexican food the other day, and they came literally in a little plastic jug with a screw top on it. And it had a note on there from the Colorado Department of Revenue for the delivery driver that said the seal shall not be unbroken during transit or something to that effect. So yeah, margaritas delivered to your house, sign me up.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, Texas did it a different way. The governor declared it legal to sell to-go drinks if they're sealed. And the TABC came out the same day and said that it was illegal, which is so typical of government. And it took them about 48 hours to figure it all out. And the governor won. So
Thank
yeah,
God.
Yeah, right.
A lot of these laws, though, will become will become permanent, because it requires these sorts of shocks in order to get everybody to question the current state of affairs, especially in beverage alcohol. So there'll be some changes, there'll be some laxing of the rules, and tightening that back up, I think is unlikely. So there'll be some loosening that I think is a permanent change to how the business operates.
Absolutely, Como. I agree with you 100%. You can't put toothpaste back in the tube. Once people are used to these laws, why would we go back? It didn't create Armageddon. It didn't create cats and dogs actually getting along and living together. So, Como, who does that benefit if we're looking at beer, wine, and spirits? I think it might benefit spirits.
It's benefit spirits, because if you're ordering drinks to go from a restaurant, if Bud Light or Miller Lite or Coors Light is what you want, if it's Modelo's or what you want, you may have them already. Maybe you do it once in a while as a convenience, getting it from a restaurant. Maybe if you're doing something special, like something for Cinco, fine. But the old fashions or margaritas, whatever they are, it's the cocktails, the things that require a little bit more effort. Maybe a restaurant that'll pair your food and your wine because you don't really know how to do that. So when you pick your food, they'll pick your wine for you. So where the restaurant, the bartender, the server, the hostess, where the incremental pieces of value that the ecosystem brings, they bring a lot more value to wine and spirits than they bring for beer. And
Right.
so I think this benefits, I guess it's another thing that benefits the wine and spirits folks over the beer folks.
Right. All right, so let's get to the GTB loan. So the, the PPP loan, the payroll
those other letter
protection
things.
program. It's a payroll protection program. You know, Congress initially, put 300 billion, whatever, 300 billion in, and it got sucked up by the bankers. The banks were like, hey, I'm going to give it to the people who owe us the most so that they won't default on their loans to us, which was, any idiot could have seen that that's what was going to happen. So the second wave came in, and and now we're seeing it filter down to small corporations. What are you guys seeing? Is that going to help? Or is it just shooting a BB gun into a fucking tornado?
Well, first you think about, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, is stimulus is usually intended to get your citizens to spend money to drive the economy. People money in their pockets, they spend more. The economy is a series of transactions between people, businesses, entities, and such. But what this has done is basically it's trying to support what felt like something that didn't really have a bottom. It wasn't that same sort of stimulus that maybe we were looking at in 2008. This is a very different sort of things to say, okay, there may be no money at all. We may be seeing unemployment like we've never seen before. And it's very, it's spending at the most basic level, food and such. And so it's not really the thing that kicks the economy into gear. It just prevents really particularly bad things happening to the economy. And so it's very much, at least as far as I see it, the first wave of what will need to be a series of things that will take. And as JB says, it'll take a lot to unfreeze this thing. And so far
Seems like there's a little bit of a fundamental flaw. And look, I have not read all 1,380 whatever pages the thing is. So, but I think I have this basically right, that these loans can be forgiven. The debt goes away. It's basically free money to you if you hire 75% of your payroll that you had prior to COVID-19 hitting. You can use up to 25% of the money to pay your rent and the leases. But the problem is you're hiring these people back, but you have nothing for them to do. Your business isn't open. And depending on the state labor laws, some states, it's better for the employee to stay at home and to get unemployment benefits. They get more money than they would if they take the PPP money. And I checked in with some people today, over the last couple of days before we did another one of these. And these guys are like, look, I need this money really to be paying my rent at my warehouse and my lease, my landlord, all this stuff about landlords working with people. I haven't heard a lot of that. I've heard a little bit of that, but I haven't heard a lot of that. And So, you know, I think there's some fundamental flaws in the system. I'm not standing on my soapbox up here. It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback in the middle of a pandemic, and Congress had to do something. I think it was very reactionary, but I don't think it was very well thought through. And we knew from day one there wasn't near enough money to go around. And I think this is one of these things that we just can't buy. We can't borrow and buy our way out of this. But I have heard a common complaint from people that they're wanting me to put these people back on payroll, and that's great for them, and that's good. That's what the money was for the people that have been unemployed. But I'm not sure that it gets us any closer to ultimately rescuing these businesses in the end.
I totally agree with you, JB. It's, the problem fundamentally is that most members of Congress have never made a payroll.
And never run a business.
They never run a business, so they don't understand. And, you know, what they should have done, I think, is said, you know, here's the money, and we're going to audit you later. And make sure that you didn't just put it into your personal account and you know, buy a boat or something. I mean, the threat of an audit, you go to jail if you're, so anyway, but, you know, we can't, like you said, we can't play Monday morning quarterback. It's done. But,
well, and the other question is, and let's hear from Bump too, but the other question is, who's really refereeing this? There's no referee. I mean, how? What are they?
And then they send you the money, and then the IRS says, "Oh, by the way, we're going to tax it because you can't write off your." I'm like, well, then why not just send 80% of the money instead of sending 100% and then sending 20% back? Anyway, Bump, what do you say about all this bullshit?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack on this one. I know of companies who have received the payroll protection program incentives. And number one is one particular brewery was able to hire all of the employees back that he had furloughed, that they had furloughed. And he's got them back working on the streets. And JB, you're right. These guys, if there's nothing to do, I don't know what to do with that money, but he hired 38 of his employees back, which I thought was a great thing. I like that idea. The other thing that I'm seeing from folks who are getting this payroll protection program is that they're taking the people that maybe they don't have a full-time job. Maybe they're not working their 40 or 60 or 80 hours a week, whatever they work. What they're doing is saying, look, when the dimmer switch starts to get turned back on and we can go back to work, he said, I need you guys to start working on distributor strategies, on portfolio strategies, on retailer strategies, on sampling strategies. Start to put together a detailed plan so that when that whistle does blow, we're not sitting here spinning our wheels. We're getting ready to go. So I think that's a good redeployment of that payroll protection program that he's thinking, that these guys are thinking the future. The guys that are just sitting back waiting on, I'd go back to something you said earlier, JB. Those guys were going to go out of business anyway. They weren't prepared. These guys that are still hanging tough and that are reinvesting that money into hiring people back to do programs and planning and communications with retailers and distributors and consumers and portfolio for when that whistle goes off, that's a good use of money.
In some ways, there's two different recessions. One, which is businesses are shut down, folks are staying home. The second recession is what's the demand once everybody's not forced to do that? And there hasn't really been a lot of discussion on what to do for that second part. How are we going to stimulate demand once we are allowed to be out and about? Because we're going to turn ourselves on slowly, as some states are doing, carefully, I think. And at that point, you may look around wondering where the business is, where the demand is. Does anybody want to buy my widgets? And that's a very different exercise, which will require a very different sort of intervention. And nothing's really been done on that side yet.
Yeah, that's my point about taking time for things to thaw. You know, you keep hearing a common theme of, you know, when on-premise does open, it'll be at reduced capacity. So if you already, even if you're half capacity and the people drink as much as they did before. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but if half the people show up and drink as much as they did, it's probably 50% of the money you used to make. So it's going to, again, just trickle in, I'm afraid, until we get past this social distancing phase. And I don't think we really know when that's going to happen yet.
Hey, Harry, could I ask a question for a sec? All right. So this one kind of goes to JB. Comio, you can throw your 2 cents in too, but it's really, I think, a JB issue is with the sagging economy, with the sagging businesses, we have been getting an inordinate amount of phone calls asking for valuations or trends on brewers, but mostly little craft distillers. People want to get in, private equity wants to get into the craft distilling business. So I think this environment, as sad as it is, has opened up a lot of pocketbooks for investors who say, I think this spirits business has got a long road. When this thing's all said and done, this is who I want to bank on. And we're seeing a ton of that. GB, I know you protect confidentiality exceptionally well. That's why I love working with you. Have you seen any types of increase in inquiries for the health and wellness of companies, whether it be in beer, wine, or spirits that you guys are working with?
Have I seen increase in
inquiries in terms, hey, can you help me understand the health and wellness of this distillery or this brewery or this?
I think we obviously get a lot of questions, you know what I mean? In many ways, we've been way busier than we were before this hit, because we are trying to be out there and help people in any way we can to live to fight another day. So, the common questions are, I think we've kind of all accepted that we will be living in a very different world. There's a pre-COVID-19 world and there's going to be a post-COVID-19 world. So there's a lot of conversations about what does that world look like? How quickly does it turn on? How quickly does on-premise come back? What will it mean for partnerships and M&A and things like that? I do think the common theme of people realizing if they were on the fence before and thought that they may or may not want to find a strategic partner, or even not a partner, but find capital to invest and grow their business, the haves and the have-nots seem to be falling on a very clearly defined side of the line. And people are becoming more clear every day. I will indeed live to fight another day. And when I do, I believe that there will be opportunity for me, sadly, because there will probably be less competition. I'm looking 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road. And those people wisely are digging in, leaning in, and figuring out how to best position themselves for the opportunity that they believe will be there. We're having all kinds of conversations like that. Now, as far as M&A actually getting done, we did announce one deal at post-COVID-19, but it had long been in the works. I think there's a lot of conversations going on, and I think the wise people are like, I really don't want to lose my place in line. I want people to know that I am looking for a partner. I am looking to grow my business. I am here living to fight another day. That does not necessarily equate to deals being able to be closed because the financial markets are so uncertain is one point, or just flat out not working the way they should right now. And the other part is, I think even in the perfect match, if you have the quote perfect deal, I don't think anyone really knows how to evaluate the future going forward. So there's this sort of hangover on the valuation piece. And if you're really bullish on your business, you're kind of weighing that line back and forth. Do I do now? Do I wait? But plenty of conversations are taking place and will continue to take place. And that's good, healthy dialogue.
There's no way to value anybody's company right now.
No.
Well, no, I think there's a bigger problem, Harry.
You can start at book value.
What's that?
You can start at book value. Real assets in the ground, tanks, buildings.
Yeah. So how much fucking stainless steel do you have? Let's start there. I mean, that's pathetic.
So here's where I was going with the second part of the question is, and I think it's a threat. I probably shouldn't have said that, is most of the inquiries we're getting for valuations for health and wellness of brands, distilleries in particular, and brewers is coming from international companies. They're not coming from US-based companies. They're coming from Pacific Rim, or they're coming from the European, the EU sector. That's who's looking to invest in the United States. And that scares me a little bit, but.
So dumb money.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, sorry. Shouldn't have said that.
No, you can edit that.
I'll edit it out. I mean, I just don't. There's too much stainless steel out there. Not enough demand. The number I think is probably 40%. 40% of currently licensed craft brewers may not be in business 2 months from now.
Yeah, I think that number's probably close to, if not conservative.
We certainly stopped the openings. I mean, the long tail's been expanding rapidly for a really, really long time. Several years now, we've been, 1.5 to 2 a day opening. And I mean, that just came to a screeching halt. And then we could banter back and forth all day about how many, will and won't make it. And that's not a very fun exercise, but I think that we all agree there's going to be some attrition.
Yeah, but I agree. And I can't remember if we talked about it or not, but there had already been a natural culling of the herd from retailers and distributors. That long tail of underperforming SKUs, they're just not getting replaced. Come the fall sets, or if spring sets get tweaked at all, that long tail is getting whacked. I mean, it's getting whacked hard. And it's not just for craft brewers. It might be for domestic brewers too. That say, we just don't need all those SKUs. But it was a natural SKU reduction that took place during COVID.
Here's an interesting question. What about brewers who were kind of going under, but had an off-premise presence, who are now having a resurgence? And I can think of a couple of them in my head, but I don't want to call them out. But they were kind of just like, and then now, because they were canning and they had an internal canning and it was sucking wind, now their business is returning because they weren't relying on a tap room. How about that?
That's the balanced business strategy I think JB was talking about up front. Is, folks, if you're direct to consumer only, you're out of luck. You're probably in the tank by now. If you were part DTC and part 3-tier, you were rolling the dice. You had a chance of survival. The folks that had a good balanced portfolio, had picked their distributor partners wisely, had put together a strong strategic off-premise sales plan prior to COVID, those are the guys that have shifted their on-premise or DTC to off-trade. Those guys are surviving and actually flourishing. We see that in the numbers. I mean, the top, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but we ran the top 25 craft brewers, and all but one had positive numbers. And it's because they had a 3-tier strategy that focused on the off-premise chain environment.
And that's a complete reversal of those top 20 from,
Yes, right.
There was a lot of red in those numbers at the end of 2018 and into 2019. There was a lot of red in there, and they have had somewhat of a resurgence. And I think it was people being comfortable with some trusted brands. And I think it stopped a lot of the experimentation. We got to remember, guys, that there's been fundamental shifts happening in the off-premise trade because of these tap rooms.
Yes.
You're going there to have a couple of pints, and when you leave, you take a couple of growlers to go. You take a couple of 4-packs of 16-ounce cans to go. Well, those sales aren't there, right? So people are buying that beer somewhere else, and the larger, more established brands had the shelf space and have the established presence. So I think that's a little bit of what's going on. Is that, like we've already said, people are going to continue to drink, but you're not buying your typical however many growlers you drink a month at your tap room because they're just not there. So you're going to buy what's at the store and what's on the shelf, and that's going to be tried and true established brands for the most part in larger pack sizes. Nobody's going to go to the store and buy a freaking 6-pack.
Right.
So that's true. That's true across industries. So you're not just seeing that in beer. You're seeing that across personal products, consumer products, soft drinks. You're really seeing that across industries, and it's likely to be permanent one of the things that's been happening over the years is in order to get shelf space, certainly incremental shelf space, you had to have some sort of innovation. You had to have something different. And so as that compounded itself year after year after year, you ended up having a really fragmented shelf. And that's something that's changed very substantially and very, very quickly.
Yeah.
JB,
Harry, here, go ahead, Bump.
Is it going to go back? I mean, I don't know that it will.
That was what I was about to bring up. If you look at so much of all the new product development and innovation that has driven growth in the last few years, how in the world would you forecast that these days? How, you know, we're going to have some challenges forecasting anything as the on-premise trade starts to reopen and the markets start to normalize again. But, you know, I don't even know where you would start if you wanted to start pumping out new products and how you would forecast those and what quantity.
The thing is, you can cut SKUs quickly, but SKU proliferation happens fairly slowly to the point where no one really knows it's happening until it's too late. And they look back at the portfolio or they look back at their shelf and they're saying, holy smokes, we've overdone it. You don't feel it until you're 5 years in or 7 years in. And so in terms of trying to forecast it as best you can.
To go back to my frog analogy, it's like that frog that threw a dick and he's sitting in cold water on a stove and he doesn't know it goes to boiling because it's so slow to boil.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go with that, Camille.
Hey, Millicent, have him edit that later.
Yeah, when you said frog in cold water, I thought you were going to George Costanza route. My bad.
Listen, Bill Coors told that story about a frog in a pot. He loves that.
Right.
He's told it, you know, 5
So
or 6.
JB, I want to go back to what you said, and it's kind of interesting for beer. Is initially, so week ending March 8th, week ending March 15th, week ending March 22nd, the 3 initial weeks of COVID. We saw that panic buying. I still call it pantry loading. I don't care what other people call it. It's pantry loading. Those were the 30 packs. Those were the suitcases and 30 packs. And we saw the total sales of beer going through the roof because people are spending a lot of money on 30 packs versus a 6-pack or a 12-pack or even a 4-pack. So we saw dollars go up. Price per case came down, but total dollars went up. The past couple weeks, we think consumers, or we see a lot of 12-pack getting purchased now. So the dollars are still up there, but the price per case has come back up again because folks are buying 12s. So whether it's an import 12 or for the crafts that have 12 packs or the hard seltzers, we haven't talked about those guys yet, but hard seltzers that have 12s, we're seeing an inordinate amount of 12-pack cans. It's the #1 selling package, and it's the #1 driver of incremental volume, followed by 12-pack glass. So we see the 12-pack coming back into play. We saw that fluctuation of 30 packs driving price down, or 12 packs driving price up, but dollar sales for the category continue to fly up. So I'm of the opinion right now that there's health and wellness out there. There's opportunity, that light shining for everybody. But to Harry's question, it's for those brewers that have the attention and the focus and the execution of their distributor partners. If you're not on their top 5, 6, 7 brewer partners, those are the guys that are on the fringe of getting cut. If you're in that top 5, 6, you're getting execution. You're getting the Sam Adams out there. You're getting the New Belgiums out there. You're getting Sierras. You're getting the White Claws, the Trulies. You're getting those brands out there. The Miller Coors Network, and I tried to make a joke of it before, but when I look at the Molson Coors Network, I said Miller Coors, I meant Molson Coors. Most of them have the Constellation portfolio. Most of them have the White Claw portfolio or the Mike's Hard portfolio. Most of them have Boston Beer. Most of them have Sierra Nevada. The majority of those distributors have got hot hands right now. And I think when I look at hard seltzer being up 338% the most current week, and I see Cinco de Mayo happening this week, I know where those distributors are going. I know what they've been doing. I know where they've been focusing. And that's why the STRs, I think, for Molson Coors shipments are a little bit soft. I know what their distributors are doing.
What about an AB distributor that does not have Constellation?
What are they doing?
Yeah.
So Mick Ultra has done a phenomenal job. It's still on fire. They focused again on the Bud Light package, which has come back to life. Even Bud Red is in the positive. To JB's point earlier, at the end of 19, the top 25 brands, half of them were in decline. Now all 25 of them, all 25 of those top are growing double.
When I read your report this morning,
Yeah.
I was surprised. You know, AB even led Mark Anthony in as far as growth, and they're back on top. And and you know that it's Michelob Ultra and Bud Light.
And Bud Light Seltzer, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And you know,
Well, it'll be interesting to see from a beer standpoint. We have 8,800 breweries or something going into this thing, and a vast majority of them were tap rooms. And I think we had already come to a place where about 1 out of 10 on-premise craft draft pints were consumed in a tap room. And they were also doing a fair bit of growler and crowler and to-go sales, and all that stuff dried up. You know, and I just wonder how much of that halo effect was there. And now that it's gone and they're shifting over to those brands, I don't see that reversing itself very quickly.
JB, God loves beer distributors. And anytime that somebody tries to encroach on beer distributors, God said, I'm gonna create a plague that wipes all those fuckers out, and beer distributors will be the ones that win, because it's gonna wipe out, 40% of their on-premise, which they didn't make money on anyway. And it's gonna shift everything to on-premise, which is beep, beep, beep. When you hear that noise, that means money. Beep, that's a truck backing up to a docking station. And nobody makes more money than a beer distributor in the plague. And we'll edit this out, I'm sure. But is this not the truth? I mean, no, their shit doesn't stink unless you're in a beach market right now.
Well, to be fair, they have shown their mettle. They have proven their mettle, man. They have done a better job than a lot of other CPG companies of getting in there. They've put their people at risk. They've been working around the clock, and my hat's off to them. In terms of the service that they've been able to deliver. Now, I also agree with your other point that they are going to be the big winners in this, because it is going to weed out a lot of accounts that they weren't making a lot of money servicing in their traditional on-premise. A lot of those are going to go away. And then a lot of people that there were not big competition, but some competition for them in terms of self-distributed tap rooms and things like that. A lot of those guys are going to go away, and they're sitting still holding the hottest hand of brands around. That seems like a pretty good place to be.
Listen, don't.
Word pressure.
Years ago, when I left New Belgium, Joe Thompson tried to get me to buy a beer distributor in Arkansas. Maybe I should have done it, but I've never been very smart.
Yeah, I think with the beer distributors and their execution, also with other DSD players, whether it's Frito or Coca-Cola, there's been this wave as retailers try to become more and more efficient to try to figure out the value of DSD and the debate on DSD versus warehouse. And in cereal, we saw we had of the two major players, one went warehouse, one went DSD. And I think that pressure that was coming from retailers to try to figure out how to capture some margin throughout the chain is probably going to abate, because the real value of DSD has shown itself, not just in beer, but across a series of things. In fact, it may even, because the pendulum never really seems to sit in the middle, the pendulum may actually swing the other way, where there's more of an ask, more demand for DSD and DSD structures.
Oh. Guys, we should start closing this up. So do you guys have closing remarks? What a great discussion. We're in, like I said, day 50, at least from my perspective. The Ides of March was where I started. And we've seen the beer industry be resilient, but we've also seen it be, just get killed on other fronts. Where do we see this going forward from today? Texas is opening up. Their restaurants here in San Antonio have opened up. I don't see too many people going to restaurants, but we're starting to see an opening. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm going to start this one off because I got to go check on something. But first of all, Millicent, happy Mother's Day to you, and everybody out there, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
You bet. Here's my thinking on this one. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we had a really high peak sales period from consumer takeaway. Last week, we had sales to retailers at almost 4th of July levels. I think this week ending, so May 3rd, week ending May 3rd, will equal to or surpass the prior week's sales for consumer poll. My big shout out to brewers and distributors right now is you better check your fucking inventories. You better check your inventories because I think some brewers have fallen asleep and cut back their package production. I think some distributors are saying, I don't know what's going to happen in the business. I'm going to run my inventory down level. My word to the distributors and brewers is you guys better start getting together because to JB's point, these mature legacy craft brands, these import brands, these strong local macro brewer brands, if your forecasting model isn't tuned up right now, you're going to be out of stock. And being out of stock at this point in time is a dagger in the heart. So get together, talk about inventory, order up, and don't be out of stock because it's coming.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think you're right on. And do you think that there will be major market share shifts during this COVID-19? I've heard some distributors in my ears saying, you know what, I think we're gonna see some market share shifts that are permanent.
That's a tough, I'm not going to say nationally. I can't say that nationally. On some local markets, sure, that could happen. As some bigger craft brands that may have been ignored or been sacrificed for that long tail are coming back to life. Yeah, I think that could happen. The big brands, what I've seen is the big got bigger. And I think when I get below that big level, that could happen. You could see some local cities market DMA or market share shifts. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
JB Shireman.
Yeah, I think we'll see some share shifts. I think it's inevitable. For a variety of reasons, whether it's players going away, established players realizing that they still have brand loyalty and they're in front of the consumer right now and the consumer's still buying. I think we'll see some share shifts. As far as what the next few weeks hold, I would say the people that are going to live to fight another day, the common theme that I see accelerating, they're getting lean and mean, man. They are going through their numbers. They're going through their business. They're going through their strategy, and they're rolling up their sleeves and fighting harder and smarter than they ever have. And I think there's nothing but good that comes out of that. I think they're really examining where they probably could and should have trimmed back on some things before. And they're realizing they can still run their business very successfully by tightening up the screws a little bit, and they're still delivering exceptional products and service and doing right by their people. So I think they're going to see more of that. People are really going to have to scrutinize their business plans and their strategy. The other thing that I see happening is people are really kind of operating in this place of like, the past is the past, man. We're not going back. This is the smart ones, I think. They're not going back. We are fully looking forward. And we don't know what the future looks like yet, but we are looking forward, and we're going to find a way to win. And I think that focus, that hard focus on the future and that tenacity is really going to pay off for a lot of people. So I think we'll see people emerge from this. The ones that do thrive, survive and thrive, will be leaner, smarter, and hungrier than they've ever been. And I think that's nothing but good.
Yeah.
Keep the faith. This too shall pass.
I'm with you.
It's a brave new world for sure, and the strong will survive. Like the little Dick Turtle I talked about earlier.
Frog.
Mill, bring it home, because you always have an expansive view, because we're a little focused on our little tiny little focus of the consumer product industry. Beer. Bring us home with what's really happening out there in the world.
Look, I guess there's three things we need to think about seriously. And the first, I'll maybe dovetail off of what Bump was saying about inventories, because I think what he's picking up on, which is important, is when we go into these environments, folks get conservative and they tend to try to conserve cash appropriately. Now, one of the ways to do that is to run leaner on inventories. I do think there's going to be share shifts. I think they'll be permanent. This won't be the only reason, but there'll be some folks that are probably squeeze their working capital a little too hard where there's opportunities, and others that decided to lean into it and were able to gain some share, and they'll be able to keep it for long periods of time. But the reason to be conservative is we really need to start looking at balance sheets a lot more carefully and a lot more closely. And it's not just the craft beers that we've been talking about in this conversation. It's true for the big companies as well. We wrote last week that Molson Coors will probably have to either cut their dividend or their debt will get downgraded below investment grade. It's a very big company. It's a
Which one do you, Como, which one do you think they'll do? I think cutting the dividend makes more sense, right, than getting their debt cut.
That's correct. Yeah, that's what we wrote. And that's a big deal. Beer companies are meant to be resilient in a recession. There used to be the stocks that you buy when times were tough or uncertain. But now you've got not just on the smaller players in craft that have been gaining share for periods of time, but even the big majors all have very stretched balance sheets and are going into an environment that we've really never seen before. And the impact of that is probably something that'll be felt across the entirety of the ecosystem. The second thing, as we mentioned earlier, is that there's different types of recessions. There's the recessions that we're experiencing right now. Everybody is home and businesses are shut off. But there'll be a demand recession that comes a bit later. And how we turn that back on and the pace at which that turns on, I think we're going to have to watch very carefully, and it will require something very different from what we're up to now. The third thing we didn't really talk about at all, and I don't have a view, but we should watch it, is any potential second waves. We've seen that, we've seen some small second waves in places like Singapore. We've seen some countries kind of open up and revert. We'll have to watch what that means here. A quote from Sean Payton, New Orleans Saints, who had COVID-19. He said he felt that we're taking the starters out with a small lead at the end of the third quarter. I hope he's wrong. I hope that's not the case, but this is something probably have to watch, where there's a lot of debates about trying to survive right now, right this second, but we want to make sure if, we've taken a punch, but what if there's another one coming? And so there's three things I think to follow and to balance. There'll be companies that come out and thrive. There'll be companies that gain a lot of share that they otherwise will not have. There's opportunities that are emerging for companies that couldn't really get noticed in a sea of SKU proliferation. But there's also some things we have to watch on the horizon that could be a little scary.
Como, I think we should probably just expect a second wave, just out of caution. I can't imagine that this is the last we've seen of this bullshit virus.
Yeah, and if it was true that the consumer has and is starting to acclimate, and folks are in some way figuring out how to, keep the trains running at home between homeschooling and work, and folks that are working are figuring out video conferencing and such, which obviously I have not, because you can't see me live. But to the extent that that's all starting to move in a direction of understanding, then maybe we want to be careful not opening up too early and then having to revert, because that process will probably be a bit more painful.
Sure. All right. Well, guys, I know we could talk for another 2 hours, honestly, because we just, there's so much to say. But thank you for just spending 1 hour with me. And I know our readers and your clients and your people appreciate this. And, maybe we shouldn't call it the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse anymore.
No, we need a new name, man. Yeah.
So before I publish this, JB, we'll work on, you're the creative one of all of us. So work on another name so I won't publish it as just so it's such a downer, So, all right. Well, guys, thank you so much. And 50 days in, still, let's continue to endeavor to persevere. So,
How
ciao.
about Josie Wales?
Yeah. Oh, wow. You know that?
Of course I do. Chief Dan George. That's what
Holy
the president told him. Endeavor.
to persevere. He said it a million times, which is, I have said that all my life. You're the very first person to call out where it came from.
Harry, you know I'm a wealth of useless information.
Man, that's good. And I use it all. I use it with my children. They go, I can't do this. I can't do that. Endeavor to persevere. So, wow. Great job. All right, guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever we think is proper. And just keep doing your jobs. And thank you.
Cool. You too, Harry. Take care, everybody.
See you guys.
Be safe. Adios. Cheers, Harry.